Hello everyone, my name's Andy Rafael from eTechnics.com and welcome to another video review. Now what we're actually looking at today is something completely different to what we normally do. This is kind of outside of our comfort zone and it's this big old beast of a motherboard sitting next to me. It's actually a workstation board, so for us, like I say, it's completely out of our comfort zone. We're used to the normal retail consumer boards. This is something a little bit special, a little bit exotic, you might say. The reason that I wanted to have a look at this was a couple of reasons really. I obviously do all these videos, we do a lot of photo work as well, and that all comes down to rendering. Now when you're rendering, you're going to want the very best performance possible, and that generally comes with the best components possible. And with a board like this, which I'll tell you now is a dual socket motherboard, socket LGA 2011, that's obviously just going to give you that extra performance when you're rendering and photo editing and that kind of thing. So that was one of the main reasons I wanted it. The second reason was the fact that EVGA are bringing out the SRX, or they've brought it out, but obviously still going through a process of how it actually makes it to the market and things like that. And because we're getting one of them, this is sort of the competitor-based product, I guess. And from our sources, we can actually tell that this is going to come out slightly cheaper than the SRX. But when I say slightly, probably quite a bit cheaper. There are some problems with boards like this, and also the EVGA ones like the SR2 that came out was world renowned as being a super record board, so you could overclock beyond relief. And when you can imagine you've got two CPUs, you've got two sockets, overclocking on both of them, you're going to get some really fantastic benchmark results in terms of 3D mark, PC mark and that kind of thing. But there is a problem with these new ones. All of the Intel processors, the E5 Xeons, are locked. Because they're locked, you can't really do much with them. The multiplier is completely locked down, so the ones that we're using are the E5 2670s, and I mean straight away they retail at £1,200 each, which you can buy from scan.co.uk. I believe they've got it at about £1,200. But yeah, the multiplier is completely locked, so the only flexibility you've got with overclocking is the B clock. And as we know with things like Sandy Bridge and Sandy Bridge E, and other sort of similar socket processors that have come out from Intel recently, there has been not mass amounts of manoeuvrability when it comes to even increasing the B clock. So it should be interesting once we all get this unboxed and everything to find out exactly what it can do in terms of overclockability, performance, and the tests that we're going to run on it, because at this precise time we're not completely sure what tests we're going to run, because there's no point in us running PC Mark, 3D Mark, Metro 2033, because it's just not going to utilise the dual processors that this board has got. Whereas we are going to have to look at things like EULA, Render Blender, Blender Render even, and other rendering software, Handbrake, that kind of thing, W Prime, to see if we can really push it towards the market that this board is aimed at, which is your server-based market and your workstation-based market. And with things like the 3960X being really top processor for Intel in the consumer market at the moment, that processor, when you look at it compared to this sort of motherboard and the sort of processors that would be utilised in here, the 3960X is sort of knocking on that door. It's quite sort of up there in terms of the consumer market and just below that workstation sort of segment in the market. So when you look at the comparison between that and the Xeons, you are going to notice that they are very close in terms of their markets. You've either got the high-end consumer or the sort of mid to high-end workstation-based processors, but they're very similar chips, and hopefully you'll be able to see that when we actually get this all benchmarked and show you some results and things like that. And you can look at obviously some of our older reviews with the 3960X and you can compare it from there. So for now, that's pretty much all I wanted to sort of give you for an intro. I guess the best thing we can do is sort of go through this bit by bit, unboxing it, and then take a look at the board. There is a lot to take in. I will warn you now, this video is going to be fucking long, very long. Not a lot I can do about that, to be honest, but I know a lot of people are going to complain that it's probably too long, but I can tell you now there's so much to take in. I'm still learning about the board now, so a lot of it for me is new, but I will try and explain it as best as I possibly can. But yeah, if you do moan that it's too long, I'm sorry, but as you can see, just even from the first glance of it, there's so much stuff on this board, it's unbelievable. So yeah, what we're going to do is stop filming, bring you in a little bit closer so we can have a look at an unboxing of this, see exactly what comes included in terms of accessories, and then we'll have a look at the board itself and then get straight into the benchmarks and also see if we can overclock this bad boy with our E5 2670 dual Xeon processors. So guys, who's ready for one of my world famous, world renowned unboxings? This one's slightly different because of how huge the box is. That should hopefully give you a easy understanding on how big the Z9PE-D8 WS is. Straight away from the box, is absolutely gigantic, humongous, any other words you can think of for flipping huge will pretty much fall under this. So, Asus motherboard. We all know Asus are fantastic for their quality, performance, features, that kind of thing, so well trusted. This is a Z9PE-D8 WS. WS obviously stands for Workstation. This is a workstation board. Also can be used as a server board, workstation, or just general consumer if you have more money than sense. Now, looking at some of the main things on the front of the box, we can see PCI Express 3.0 ready, which we do know is coming to consumer boards near you in terms of the new third generation processors from Intel, but this is slightly differently. This is slightly different. It has got PCI Express 3.0 technology, but it doesn't support those new processors, third generation. It supports the Intel Xeon E5 processors. So we've got a 20% GPU boost with 4 true X16 links. We have done tests before where we've looked at the difference between X8 bandwidth and X16. There is a little bit, not mass amounts, but when you're utilising 4 cards, that's when things start to get interesting. Looking down here at some of the features, we've got 4-way SLI on demand. It has got crossfire support as well. Dual Intel LAN. We've got Asus SSD caching, where you can use your hard drive and your SSD together and just get extra performance. There are 7 PCI Express X16 expansion lanes and Gen 3 as well, obviously PCI Express 3.0. And EEB form factor. Now this is fantastic news for Asus because some of their competitors are bringing out boards that conform to a HTPX standard and not so much ATX. So we've got a 13-inch by 12-inch motherboard here, which still is absolutely huge, but smaller than some of the competition that is currently out and is coming out. You also get Asus Workstation Care as well with a 3-year warranty. Support for FirePro graphics if you are a true renderer, SLI ready, Crossfire X ready, LGA 2011 socket CPU support, so you can use a 3930 or a 3960X in this board, but only one. If you want to use both sockets, dual sockets, then you're looking at Intel Xeon. So yeah, turning the box over, we can see on this side we get a little bit of information on some of the features. So enhanced GPU parallel computing power. This is obviously utilising the board for its many PCI Express 3.0 X16 lanes to get the very best rendering workstation. Total feature enhancement with complete I/O, so that's things like the SSD caching, dual Intel LAN, DTS 7.1 sound, USB 3.0. We also get SSD caching with Asus's own sort of version of IRST, just to give 3 times faster performance over a normal standard mechanical hard drive. Down here are all the specifications, which I'll let the cameraman just sort of pan across so you can sort of see exactly what's there. Simple things: Intel C602 Express chipset, support for 4-way SLI and quad Crossfire X, RAID upon RAID upon RAID upon RAID, gigabit LAN through Intel, and loads more features. We will list all of these features on our written article very, very soon. And you also get a view of the board, just talking through some of the main features. So we've got memory support. There's 8 DIMM slots, up to 256 gig of memory at 1600, 1333 and 1066. ECC and non-ECC memory, because obviously it's a server board. CPU support is the LGA 2011 sockets for Intel Xeon E5 2600 processor family. Even though it is LGA 2011, it hasn't got the X79 chipset. It's Intel 6 CO2 Express. Storage, bucket loads. Expansion, even more. Audio, you know, we've got some fantastic high definition audio. USB, there's USB 3, and then obviously the gigabit LAN as well. If I turn the box back over, I can show you, much like with most Asus boxes, they have this sort of flap on the front which opens up to reveal more features. Now, just starting at the top, we've got the new digital power control. As we know with their consumer boards, all about sort of, you know, their DigiPlus VRMs and things like that, so we've got that. We also have the EEB form factor, small size, big capability, so it's just really packing a lot of features into a board that is still capable for most cases. SATA ports, we've got a total of 6 SATA 6 gig per second ports, just to give that extra functionality. RAID is supported as well, which we will talk through. True USB 3.0, so 10 times faster than before with USB 3.0. Moving back up to the top, we have 7 PCI Express Gen 3 X16 lanes. That's crazy for any motherboard. So fantastic performance that you'll be able to get out of that. ECC DIMM, so like I say, you can use unbuffered and buffered memory with this non-ECC, whatever you like really. Dual gigabit LAN through Intel's controller. Solid state capacitors, which is obviously all to do with Asus giving you the very, very best quality. And then moving over here, 8 DIMM design, so there's 8 DIMM slots in total to give you larger bandwidth, 4 per socket. Moving slightly further down, we've got the GP diagnosis with a debug tool, start power and reset buttons, Intel Xeon support for the new E5 2600s, DTS sound support as well, which obviously gives you uncompressed audio. Then we also have server level compatibility with RAID cards, LAN cards if you need that extra functionality through the 7 PCI Express X16 expansion lanes. Easy Quick Gate as well, which is your USB device installation. There is actually full proper USB ports on the motherboard itself, so if you've got it out of a chassis you can just plug straight into there. Socket LGA 2011 support, and then obviously Crossfire X and NVIDIA SLI. Now, this video has gone on too long. What we need to do is start unpacking it. So it actually comes in this sort of sleeve. Taking that off, it just reveals exactly the same on the actual outside of the box. So nothing new on there. We've got the board itself, but we don't want to show you that. First we'll talk through the accessories and then we'll go back to the board. So if I can get this box out, I can then reveal to you what we have here. So lots of goodies, as you can see. Starting over here, we've got a rear I/O panel. This is a high-end board, so they have included a high-end I/O. As you can see, it's black and not boring old silver. Very posh. Only joking. Comes with a SLI connector as well, but not just stopping there. You also get, if I open this one up, a 3-way NVIDIA SLI connector for those really wanting some extreme performance. But if you want to go one better than that, you can go for this one, which comes included, which is a 4-way NVIDIA SLI. So you've got your 4 ports ready and waiting to have some extreme SLI action for rendering. So if you've got something like the NVIDIA Quadros, obviously you can stick them in there for rendering, or just normal GTX cards, which obviously gives you fantastic results because of CUDA. SATA connectors, we've got 2 cables in here. They're not right angled, they're just normal, 2 of them. We also get another 2 there, and another 2 there, and another 2 which are red, and another 2 which are red. And it doesn't stop there because there's another 2 here. One of them's a right angle. Also comes with a 4-pin Molex to SATA power connectors. And another 4 here. One is a right angle again, Molex to SATA connectors as well. And that's it. So in total you get 4, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 different SATA connectors. Some are red, some are black. Obviously SATA 3, SATA 2, but SATA 2 works with SATA 3 anyway. So there you go. We also have a bunch of screws. Not quite sure why, but there is a bunch of screws there. They might have actually been put in from something else. Not completely sure, but we'll ignore that for now. If I was to see these on a consumer board, I would go absolutely spastic because I think they're unneeded. COM or serial ports, whatever you want to call it. But on a server board, they are still very much needed to communicate with other external devices. So they are handy. They do include 2, and they do come on an expansion bracket for the rear of your case. like I say, if this was a consumer board, I'd think, what the hell are you doing? But being a server board, it has got the functionality sort of ready and waiting. Now, you also get another expansion slot which has FireWire and 2 USB on it. It's not USB 3.0, it's just standard USB 2.0, but still extra functionality nonetheless. Now, moving over to here, we have a bag full of goodies, which includes the patented Q-Connect headers for putting your front panel connectors and everything onto your motherboard. We also have the connector here for USB to SATA DOM power cable, as they call it on there. Now, what this is essentially you can buy SSDs that plug straight into a connector, and this just really gives the power to it. It's quite a unique little design. It looks very similar to an what's the old card, the compact flash cards. Looks very, very similar to that. Is very, very expensive, but for some reason Asus believe there's functionality there for it, so this is the USB to SATA DOM power cable that is required to run it. You also have software and a support DVD as well, so quite a lot sort of going on here. And moving on from that, we have a quick start guide, the ARS manual, Asus Workstation motherboard, and then for the novice users, because server people aren't going to need this, are they? For the novices, generally I think everyone's going to want to use this at some point in time, the user guide. And what we actually found quite funny is we think Asus might be living in the past a little bit with their old systems, and if you look in the background, it does look like a CRT monitor. So, but yeah, lots of information in here, specs, layouts of the board, different configurations, BIOS, and I will warn you, every single page of this is in English. So it's not like it's split up into sections, you know, and only 7 pages or 10 pages of it is in English. The whole thing is in English, and there is a lot to go through. So if you are a novice user, I'd suggest having a look at that. For now, we're going to move all this stuff out of the way. We're then going to get the board out and take you on a little look at the board. So back in a minute, guys. There's one CPU socket. There's 2 CPU sockets. So, yeah, dual socket Xeon board. How confusing can you get? Like I said, and I will keep saying this is all new to us, so we will try and relay the information as best as we can to you. So, starting with the socket really, we've got 2 sockets, one over here and one over here. Now, they support socket LGA 2011, but that doesn't mean you can stick your 3960Xs in here. To our knowledge, you can put one in here in CPU socket 1, but not into the other. If you want to utilise both sockets, then you need to use the Xeon E5 2600 family of processors. A little bit about them really, they are server-based chips, primarily for boards like this. They support Intel Turbo Boost technology to give you the very best results, but they are locked, which means overclocking is way out the question in terms of increasing the multiplier. Memory support, you can see that we've got 2 memory DIMMs on each side of each socket, so obviously 8 DIMMs in total on the board. And in regards to support, 256GB is the maximum capacity of DDR3, 800, 1066, 1333 and 1600. ECC, non-ECC, unbuffered memory in quad channel mode, so obviously these 4 ports will work for this socket and these 4 ports will work for that socket. Nice and simple, and hopefully everyone's still with me nodding in agreement. Moving around the back sort of end of the board, if I sort of turn it round ever so slightly, you can see power wise that we've got an 8-pin up here, which obviously supplies power to this CPU socket over here, socket 2. We've also got another 8-pin here which supplies power to this socket. Then we've got a 24-pin and a 4-pin Molex. Other connectors worth knowing about, obviously we've got our fan headers up here as well, one here and one here for your CPU fans, but we also have an SMB connector as well for system management, so if you've got anything with flashing lights on to tell you your network status and things like that, you can plug it straight into there. But there is another space for something similar to that, which I'll talk through very, very soon. Moving the board back around again, you can see that heatsink wise, there's not a mass amount to it. So we've got a heatsink over here and one over here. They are sort of quite loose-ish, I guess, but they are screwed in and bolted from the other side. We have got another one which is just below this CPU socket over here, which comes down into a flat heat pipe over here, which covers on the Intel C602 Express chipset. And now that we're actually down that sort of end of the board, you can see that we are bombarded with connectors, and I'm going to have to talk through every single one. So, we have a battery. All good? Everyone with me so far? Brilliant. We also have two fan headers over here. Now, SATA ports, you can see that we have a lot. We have two blue ones, four black, four sort of grey coloured, and then another four black ones. Right, so starting with the two blue ones. These two blue ones up there are supported by the Intel C602 chipset. They support SATA 6 gig per second and also support RAID 0, 1, 5 and 10 and work in AHCI mode. So nice and easy. That's, you know, pretty much what we're used to these days anyway. The four black ports are SATA 3 gig per second. Same support in terms of RAID, AHCI mode and run off the Intel C602 chipset, but they are only SATA 3 gig per second. We also have these four here, which are used for the new Asus SSD caching technology. Now, these four ports are SATA 6 gig per second, but they only support RAID 0, 1 and 10, not RAID 5, and they don't run off the Intel C602 chipset. They actually run off of a Marvell 9230 SATA controller. And then we have these four lovely ports down here, which basically are slightly different. They look like SATA ports. You may confuse them with SATA ports. They are SATA ports, but they are slightly different. Purely because they support SATA 3 gig per second, for use of the Intel C602 chipset, RAID 0, 1, 5 and 10, but it supports SAS, SCU and all different server technologies for your storage devices. Whilst we're still down here, we'll talk through some of the fan headers. We've got our front panel headers down here for your normal front panel LEDs, front power button, reset button and so forth, but you can see behind the white set of headers we've got a black set of headers, which is in conjunction with that port that we showed you at the top of the board for SMB. So if you've got network LEDs, system management panels and things like that, you can plug it into here and that will give you all of your relevant information and blinking lights basically. We've got some more fan headers down here, but the most interesting thing for me is having these on the board. We've got two normal USB ports, so you can plug something straight into there. It's not a header, it's a normal USB port, which is fantastic. You also have USB 3.0 down here, native, USB 2.0 over here, and then what looks to be FireWire as well, and some other sort of front panel connectors. In terms of other connectors and that, we also have this over there, which is your SPDIF, I believe. Yeah, so this is for obviously optical audio and that kind of thing. And in terms of audio, we also have a front panel audio connector up here. As you can appreciate, this is all very, very new to me, and I'm still learning about it. So if I sound unsure, that's because I am, but I am trying to relay all the information to you guys in the most accurate possible way. Also over here is the debug LED and power and reset buttons as well. And there is space for a little speaker, but they haven't included one there. But you can plug your speaker onto your front panel header connector instead. So, expansion slots. This is where it gets difficult because there is plenty of expansion slots, as you can see. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's 7 expansion slots. Some are blue, some are grey. What does it all mean? Well, I'm not going to confuse you because I'm confused myself, but some of these ports run off of this CPU socket up here. Some of these ports run off this CPU socket up there. And if you really want to sort of delve into it, then I suggest you take a look at Asus's specifications and maybe even their manual, but for now I'll actually show you it in their manual. So, the onboard PCI Express 1 and 3 provides one X16 Gen 3 link to CPU 1, auto switch to X8 link if PCI 2 and 4 are occupied. The onboard PCI Express, boring stuff I know, but yeah, very, very confusing. So if you're using certain SATA ports, it links to CPU 1 and runs at X16, but if you're using one more SATA port, then 4 of them go to X8 mode and yeah, very, very confusing depending on which processor it's utilising, what speed it's working at and so forth. But there is a little sort of chart down here which sort of explains it in a little bit more detail, but not fantastically. So there you go, very, very confusing, but let's rip that away. So all the slots that we've got here are X16 lanes. As you can see, you could use them for graphics cards, RAID cards, LAN cards, any other sort of card that you can think of that will fit into a normal PCI Express, whether it's X1, X4, X8, X16, whatever. Now, talking through how it works. So we've got 4 PCI Express 3.0 X16 slots, which are the 4 blue ones. Now, these will run at X16 if you're using one card, and if you're using 2 cards, they will run at X16, so you may be using this one and this one. And that will run, or even that one and that one. They'll run at X16 speeds. If you're using quad, so all of them, then you will be running at X8, 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 X8. Now, there isn't a mass amount of difference in terms of X8 and X16 bandwidth, but some people do care about that. There are also 2 PCI Express 3.0 X16 slots that run at X16 speeds, and then there's 1 PCI Express 3.0 X16 slot which runs at X8 speeds, which is this one here, I believe. So it is very confusing. I probably haven't explained it that well, and all I can do is apologise for that, because I'm terrible at explaining things that doesn't make a mass amount of sense to me to start with, because I don't think they've really relayed it very well. I would have preferred a diagram, something that I can go, wow, that goes to that, and that goes to that, but that goes to that in this case, and they work at this speed. But they didn't, they just wrote it down, and it's very, very confusing. So there you go, PCI Express goodness. That's all I'm really going to comment on the PCI Express side of things. All I can say is you can use a lot of cards, they will be very, very fast, and that makes for a very good graphics experience. Yay! So really, moving away from that, the last thing that we can really look at is, I forgot to mention the form factor. Look at it, look at how small it is. Well, it's not small, it's huge, it's gigantic, it's humongous, it's epic, I guess you could say, but it is quite small. 12 inches by 13 inches, which is fairly okay. But some people are still going to think that it's huge. But come on, it's got 2 sockets on it, it's got 7 PCI Express lanes, 8 DIMM slots, and a shitload of SATA ports. But yeah, generally, compared to other server boards on the market that are HTPX form factor, this is quite small in comparison. It's not too far away from sort of XL-ATX really. That way, it's pretty much the same in terms of ATX. It's just literally that overhang that way, which is probably about an inch or so, so not massive at all. But yeah, just wanted to comment on that. And also the styling, it's actually quite stylish for what it is. Black PCB, blue and black sort of accented PCI Express lanes, blue DIMM slots as well, and lots of silver and blues and greys and blacks and a few reds as well. So they have sort of chucked a rainbow, or a rainbow is thrown up on it to a certain degree, but it has got some sort of conventional colour scheme to it. And does look quite professional, because it is a professional board, but it does look like it means business as well, with the sort of blue, black, silvers, greys and all of that. Rear I/O is really the last place I can take you on this journey that we have taken together. It has been a fantastic journey, I have enjoyed it, but yeah, rear I/O. We have a PS2 mouse keyboard combo port, 2 USBs over here, another 2 USB ports here, another 2 USB 2.0 ports here. These ones are blue, which means, yeah, USB 3.0 ports. We also have dual gigabit LAN supplied by Intel themselves, optical SP-Diff audio output, and then we've got our high definition audio over there as well. Quite simple for a rear I/O, but what more would you really possibly need on a board like this? It's got everything that you could think of. If you need extra LAN ports, then you buy a LAN card to go into your PCI Express slots over here. If you need extra USB, then it comes with the bracket, which will obviously sit somewhere along here for your extra USB and your FireWire. If you need extra SATA ports, can't see why you would, but you know, you have got all these over there, but you could always buy a card to go in here. There's so much functionality that this board has got, or even so much potential that this board has got, that I can't see it really being a board that wouldn't appeal to everyone. Even if you don't need it, you will want it, because look at it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get this all booted up. It's going to take us a while because there is a lot to get set up on it, and then we're going to show you through the BIOS. Then we're going to do all our little normal benchmarks and bring them straight to you, and then I will summarise at the end my feelings on this board and whether it's a good buy, a bad buy, a best buy, see what I did there, and so forth. So for now, that was our little tour over the Asus Z9PE-D8 WS workstation board. Stay tuned and we will start filming for the BIOS right now. Okay guys, so what we've actually got here is we've got everything set up, and as you can see it's not the tidiest, it's not the neatest thing that you've ever seen. We've even got a bunch of cable ties actually holding this together. Normally on this test bench you'd have a big bar that goes across on the Lian Li T60s, but we took it off because we mount our coolers on there. As you can see, we have two lovely Corsair H80s just randomly sort of sitting there, but obviously this board does need two. This one's not working so good, as you can see. There's no lights or anything on it. I have to speak to Corsair about that one, but over here you can see that one's working fine. GTX 580 super overclock in there, and everything's sort of connected up. We've got a couple of SSDs, and one for the operating system and one for our testing as well, and everything's all well and good. So what we've actually done is running on our AOC 27-inch monitor over here. We've got three of them, just in case you were wondering. We've gone into BIOS now. Getting into BIOS isn't as easy as you think. Normally you keep slamming on the delete button, but instead you have to sort of hold it down, we found is the best way. But now that we're in here, you'd think that Asus, all the products that they've been releasing recently, it may have a UEFI BIOS, which is it, but it's not the GUI friendly one that we've all seen with the EZ mode and the advanced mode and so forth. Instead we get a pretty sort of simple looking BIOS, but it's anything but simple. So I'm just really going to take you through some of the things that are on here. So obviously main screen, we're just greeted with the general stuff, and as you can see it's Tuesday, the 20th of March 2012 at 26 minutes past midnight. So it has been a late one. We've been doing a lot of testing on this board, and yeah, really we just wanted to bring that over to you. So that's the main screen. We can see processor, we've got 2600 megahertz, and the count is 2 because we have got two Intel Xeons once the autofocus kicks in, which it doesn't look like it's going to. But yeah, we've got two dual Xeons, here we go. Yeah, two dual Xeon E5 2670s in here, and then we've got 32 gig of Kingston HyperX 2133. So moving back over to here, where the autofocus does kick in now. AI tweaker, as you'd expect, this is where you're going to overclock. So you've got your AI tweaker. Normally you'd have XMP, but you don't have that, so you've literally got manual, and you can adjust the B clock. Now we're told that you can get a little bit of an overclock with this, but we've tried absolutely everything to no avail, because this processor is locked. So even at 26, if we want to take it up to 28, we can put that in there. It's not going to do diddly squat. DRAM timing control, there's so many settings in here, it's unbelievable. Obviously all the different channels that you've got, A, B, C, D and so forth. CPU 1 voltage, this is for your V-core on the first CPU, then we've got the second and the VSA, DRAM channel A and B, C and D, E and F, G and H, loads of different settings in there. Moving over to advanced is where it really does get advanced. There's so much stuff in here, it's unfreaking believable. So CPU configuration, we can check on the CPU 1 information, and bearing in mind these 2670s aren't cheap chips, they're £1,200 each. You can buy them at Scan. I believe they've got them at pre-order at the moment, should be getting stock soon, but yeah, £1,200 I believe they are. In the US it's about $1,700. Coming back out, and we've got all the normal settings, hyper-threading, active processor cores and so forth, virtualization. CPU power management, loads of settings in there in terms of EIST, turbo mode, C3, C6, C7. Obviously with a server, it's always handy to have power saving modes. Chipset configuration, this is, if you remember from the sort of, old X58 days with the QPI links, we've got all the settings for that. More for the memory configuration, where we can change the memory mode from independent. rank interleaving, and we can even get up our DIMM information as well down the bottom. So that just tells you that we have got 32 gig of memory in there. Some more stuff in terms of the CPU, PCH configuration, where you can obviously enable and disable certain onboard devices such as a HD audio. Once again, for virtualization, sorry about the autofocus here guys, it's not fantastic I know, but yeah, a little bit about the virtualization again. PCH SATA configuration, I mean, as you can see, there is a lot of SATA ports here, 4 down there, 4 there, 4 there, 2 there. So yeah, because of that there's a lot of settings for SATA, so you can control obviously SATA mode, IDE, RAID, AHCI mode, the SATA controllers, it tells you what's plugged into each, and then you get your SAS configuration as well, because it has got support for SAS as well. PCI subsystems, there's lots of settings in here for your PCI Express settings, because there's a lot of PCI Express ports on here. It just seems like this goes on forever and ever and ever. USB, obviously we've got USB 3.0, we can configure our ports as well, so you can enable and disable certain ports, which is always handy, especially if you don't want USB to be used and you're using this in a school or a workplace. A few other settings here for ACPI, hibernation, sleep states. More configuration for hardware error architecture. APM, so all different power on features. Serial port, because it has got all the functionality for serial port. Onboard LAN configuration, there's 2 LAN ports on here, so obviously different settings for each one. ME subsystem, this just tells you information on your BIOS, status value, BIOS booting mode, and how it's optimized for performance. Marvell storage controller, because some of the SATA ports are run by Marvell, or Marvel, however you want to pronounce it. Onboard devices, we've got things for the serial port, as media USB 3 controller, and then the VR1394 Firewire controller. Runtime error logging, so you can obviously for a server, that's really handy, as well with the event logs. Moving over to boot, this is pretty much probably the simplest part of it. It's what you've seen before with hard drive, configurations and priorities and so forth. So that's probably the simplest thing, and obviously the monitor as well. And as you can see, there's so much to monitor on here. You've got CPU fan speeds, voltages, temperatures, quite a lot to go through. But you guys can see it all. We will take pictures of all this as well. And then obviously security, which if you are using this for a server, you're going to want to set things like an admin password and things like that. And then literally in tools, you've got one thing, and that's the Easy Flash to utility and exit. So guys, that is pretty much the BIOS. Didn't really want to delve on it too much because all the pictures will do the talking for us, but hopefully that's giving you an insight into the BIOS on this fantastic Asus Z9PE-D8 WS workstation board. And now we'll get over to the performance figures and show you exactly how it does in benchmarkings that are geared towards rendering and workstation benchmarks really. So boys and girls, we've had a look at the Asus Z9PE-D8 WS or workstation board. You've all seen obviously the performance figures and what it can do. You've had a little look around the board and had a look at the features, which once again are highlighted on the back here. And straight away we've got to really try and sort of summarise this up and give you our thoughts on it. Now this is the first workstation slash server board that we've looked at, but if it's anything to go by, it's really exciting that we're starting to sort of delve into this market, because this board offered mass amounts of features. Just even the little things. Obviously, dual support for the new E5 2600 processors. Yes, they are locked, and that obviously does hinder overclocking and the performance sort of given there. But even two of these at stock is still, as you saw from the benchmarks, absolutely phenomenal. Yes, you're going to pay over the odds for it compared to a normal system, but it's just unreal. Some of the performance differences that we saw when we looked at sort of our own testing compared to like 3960X is just absolutely crazy. And the fact that you can have 256 gig of memory. Now, the board itself supports 1600. Need to tell you guys that we were using 2133, but 1600 seemed to be the max we could get when we did our testing. We then sort of went back to things to see if we could push it that little bit further, and did manage to get to 1866, but what a ball ache it was to get it there. It was quite a lot of hassle really getting to 1866, and even then it wasn't 100% stable, so there was some BSODs, we did blue screen, we had some crashes and things like that, and we weren't really comfortable testing this board with all of the different components at 1866, and even trying to push it past that just didn't happen. So we did settle back down at 1600. Needed to let you guys know that in case you sort of picked up on it and wanted to sort of voice your opinion on that. That's why we did it. Plenty of other features as well. Obviously expansions, very confusing to a novice user as to how the PCI Express lanes work. Obviously there's 4 PCI Express 3.0 x16 lanes, dual x16, x16 or quad x8, 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 x8. But the more confusing thing is actually how they run, because certain ports run off one CPU and other expansion slots run off the other CPU. We will mention all of this in our written review, where we can delve a little bit into sort of further detail with it, because it can be quite confusing. Very much the same with the SATA ports. Obviously, you've got a mass amount of SATA ports that we saw. Some are obviously SATA 6 gig per second, some are SATA 3 gig per second, some support SAS, SSD caching. It's just so many different options, and you also saw from the BIOS as to how literally confusing and insane that can be for a novice user. This board isn't for the light-hearted. I can't see a novice user really wanting to spend that money to buy something like this, because a lot of it's going to be sort of wasted on them. If you are looking at using this for a server-based board, you're going to be better off just generally 3930 or 3960X. If you're after like a home server, if you want something a little bit more intense, then yes, this is going to be your bag. But generally, if you need something that's more intense like this, you're going to know about the technology itself. You're not just going to jump straight in, because you would have had the 3930, 3960X equivalent or whatever processor in a single board, general sort of home consumer board first, got to know things like Windows Server 2008 R2, and then you could obviously move over and develop your natural sort of learning to a board like this. So very, very interesting. I can't really say that this was fantastic in terms of overclocking, because it wasn't. That's not a fault of Asus, that's not really a fault of Intel. Well, probably Intel more than Asus, but just the two working together. We do know that some of the lower end, like the E5 1660 I believe it is, does clock better, and we've been speaking to the guys at Intel and they've had some really, really good results from that. Hopefully in the near future we will see Intel releasing new processors as part of maybe the E5 2600 family that can actually give you that unlock multiplier where you can start pushing things. which I know people like EVGA with their new SRX board are really sort of gunning for. I'm pretty sure Asus are as well. Haven't really spoke to them much about the whole processor side of thing and what they expect to see in the future, but I'm guessing that's the way it's going to go. For me, this board is appealing as a workstation because obviously we record all of this in 1080p HD. We then have to render it. That all takes time. If you're looking at something like this, which I'm guessing is going to be probably over half an hour's worth of video, excuse me, over half an hour's worth of video, you're going to be looking at, you know, a substantial amount of time to render, sort of 40-45 minutes. With something like this, you're going to cut that time back down, so it's more like a sort of real time, you know, half an hour's worth of footage is going to take half an hour to render. Hopefully. Obviously, it all depends on the codec that you're actually rendering from, what the codec you're rendering to, whether you're using AVCHD to MP4 or to MKV. Gaming, yes, you can game on this, of course you can. You have got the facility for you know, multi-GPU technology. Whether you're going to use it or not, you know, Crossfire, SLI, it's entirely up to you. But on a board like this, I can't see you buying it to be a gamer because the processors aren't really going to give you any extra in games. As we actually saw ourselves when we started testing the normal benchmarking suites with Metro and things like that, there isn't a mass amount in it compared to a 3960X, and most of the time the 3960X won. So there you go. All I could really say for this is, award-wise, I'd be looking at giving it something like... well, it's a tough one because we have been given some initial pricing from Asus. I'm not going to comment at this time because it isn't concrete, but if that's anything to go by, I'd say this is definitely gunning for a bang for buck award. There's so many features that this board has got, great performance as well, that it just, you know, if the price is right, it's really going to pull on and tug on the heartstrings of consumers and people who are into this sort of product. Because I can't really comment too much on the pricing because it's not concrete, I can only really talk about the performance, and to me this is an extreme performer. That's why I'm going to give it our Extreme Performance Award, because it really just sets out what it's, you know, it sets out for what it's going to do. It does it well. Yes, it is still lacking in terms of overclockability, but for a stock performance this runs absolutely amazing. Utilises as much memory as you throw it out to 256 gig, which is more than enough for most people. We'll be using 32 gig and it was flawless. Loads of support for graphics, a fantastic chipset, and even though it is LGA 2011, some people may be confused that they can, you know, that it's running on the X79 chipset. It's not. It's running on the Intel C602 Express. That does give, you know, some extra functionality in terms of what the processor can do, how it can control the memory, because the memory controller is on the processor, not on the chipset. Lots of things have changed with Intel, and it just seems to all work really, really well together. Would have been nice to possibly seen a GUI based BIOS. Obviously it was a UEFI BIOS, a UEFI, however you want to pronounce it, but it was sort of the old school BIOS. But I guess server technicians and people who are going to, you know, this board is aimed at, that's their norm, that's what they're used to. So yeah, pretty much. Extreme performance, fantastic, I will say little, fantastic board. That's actually one other key point. Form factor. It's an EBB form factor, so it actually does conform to ATX standards, not like some of the other server boards similar to this that are HTPX. You're very restricted with chassis and things like that. This will fit into pretty much every full tower case on the market, which is fantastic in terms of the dimensions. It does mean that, you know, it's going to open up more pathways for people who want to use it as a workstation board. If you are using it for a server, then obviously you're probably going to go down the HTPX route anyway, because you're going to want extra space for you know, mass amounts of drives, and you've got the functionality with SATA storage and SAS that you can do all that on here, and the SSD caching and things like that. So some fantastic features, great performance, great board. I guess now it really is just a matter of waiting for it to hit retail channels, seeing what the sort of concrete pricing is on it, and seeing really what Intel can come up with in the future. It seems to have everything that you could possibly want in terms of features. You know, PCI Express 3, USB 3, SSD caching, 4-way SLI on demand, Crossfire. Absolutely everything that I can possibly think of to make, you know, a proper render power station, or, you know, using it as a server board. it's just all down to what Intel can do in the future. If they can release some processors that are unlocked, then I can see this hitting more consumers, because people are going to want it, they're going to want to set world records on it, and they won't care how much it is. But if the price is good as well, it means they can, you know, be a little bit more selective with the other components like the processors, and hopefully buy some ones that Intel won't lock, and give you that extra overclockability and extra performance. And I guess if that happens, we'll see this board cropping up a lot on HWBot and some of the other overclocking forums and things like that out there. So, a very happy me sitting here next to this thing. It has been an absolute nightmare to test because it has been our first workstation slash server board. We didn't know what test we were going to run with it. We had to speak a lot with Asus and Intel to sort of see what's going to utilise the technology involved behind this board. But once we got things going, I can honestly say we were really impressed with the results we got. So here I am with a big smile on my face. Really happy to actually get this back onto the test system and see what else we can do. Maybe even work with Intel on some other E5 processors to see if we can get that overclocking sort of going, because I do know that the E5 1660, I believe it is, has got something extra in terms of overclockability. So for now, my name's Andy Raffel from etechnics.com. Exhausted because this has taken ages to actually test and everything, but well worth it in my opinion, and hopefully we will have this back very soon, looking at some other components to go with it, overclocking it and seeing what this bad boy can really do. So for now, I'm Andy Raffel, and let us know what you think. Subscribe, comment, do all the usual stuff. Let us know what you think about this, whether you'd buy it for your general consumer board, whether you'd look at using it for a server, workstation, whatever. Let us know what you think of the Asus Z9PE-D8 workstation motherboard.